Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a massive geopolitical reality that's playing out every single day between the US and Canada. We're looking at the Ontario-Michigan Waste Corridor. This is a physical supply chain full of chaotic construction waste that is suddenly colliding head-on with frontier artificial intelligence. We're going to explore exactly how a highly sophisticated AI architecture is acting as a sentient bridge, literally transforming physical trash into high-purity, auditable data. It's an absolutely fascinating look at where heavy industry meets the digital edge. So let's get into it. To really understand this, we first have to grasp the staggering scale of the physical problem. Right now, 3.46 million tons of municipal solid waste, or MSW, flows out of Ontario, Canada, and right into Michigan landfills every single year. To put that into perspective, Ontario trash accounts for 14.35% of all the waste disposed of in Michigan. This is not some small, under-the-radar side operation. This is a massive cross-border corridor, and it's caught the full attention of lawmakers in Washington, political figures like Donald Trump, who are closely eyeing trade policies, and Ontario Premier Doug Ford. The political and economic spotlight on this exact corridor is burning incredibly hot year-to-date. And that spotlight is causing a whole lot of friction. We're seeing major legislative pushback in the current news cycle. We're talking about proposed USMCA tariffs, or CUSMA as it's known up in Canada, that would slap a massive 35% tax on MSW. But it actually gets worse with something called the transshipment trap. US Customs is arguing that because some of this Canadian trash might contain Chinese waste, it violates de minimis rules. That triggers a brutal 40% penalty. Add to that the fact that Michigan is pushing to hike landfill tipping fees from 36 cents all the way up to $5 per ton, and you can quickly see how the old way of just dumping trash across the border is turning into an absolute financial nightmare. Now, let's bring this down to the localized risk for the folks actually moving this stuff. $100,000. That is the maximum fine for a single violation of Ontario Regulation 347, which is the law governing waste management. Moving this waste carries an intense amount of environmental liability. If a transport truck gets caught with misclassified or hazardous subject waste, the fines are anywhere from $25,000 to $100,000 per incident. The financial exposure for operators is just staggering. The risk is simply way too high to rely on human guesswork or traditional hauling methods anymore. So, to survive this physical border crisis, the industry is pivoting hard to a digital solution, the 95-wood digital refinery. This is what we call the Sentient Bridge. It sits perfectly between the messy, chaotic, heavily regulated world of construction waste and the incredibly strict, high-purity requirements of the global circular bioeconomy. By deploying this advanced tech right at the waste bin, this digital refinery secures Ontario's industrial leadership. It guarantees that only verifiable, purely clean biocarbon feedstock actually makes it through. What we are witnessing here is a massive paradigm shift. The old mindset was purely physical, right? You haul wood for a fee, cross your fingers at the border, and pay those heavy tariffs and tipping fees. But the new mindset, it's all about manufacturing auditable trust data through an AI consensus software as a service model. The business isn't really about moving trash anymore. The business is proving the purity of the material so definitively that you achieve a zero tipping fee status. The real value has completely shifted from the physical wood itself to the digital provenance data that verifies it. Let's break down exactly how this application workflow plays out in the field through the digital refinery's UI/UX. It kicks off with a simple request for quote. Then, right there in the waste yard, Edge AI verifies the load. Next, a cloud console is brought in to reach a consensus check on that data. And finally, the system spits out the output, a highly bankable certificate of origin PDF. It is an incredibly streamlined workflow that takes a chaotic pile of physical waste and processes it into structured, highly valuable compliance documentation. Okay, let's geek out for a second and zoom into the micro-level tech making this possible. The fleet hardware is making an imminent jump from the Pixel 10 Pro to the Google Pixel 11 Pro. We're talking about devices powered by the Tensor G6 chip and running Android 17. But the real secret sauce here is the Light RT AI stack running locally right on the device. Think about that. This isn't a massive server farm in a pristine data center. This is highly sophisticated artificial intelligence operationalized on a smartphone, sitting right in the hands of an operator in a noisy, dusty waste yard. And what's actually running on that phone? The agentic Gemma 4 Edge AI model. By using a clever technique called turbo quant compression, this incredibly powerful model is squeezed right onto the mobile device. In the real world, this means blazing, instant speed. The Gemma 4 model can look at a piece of wood and classify it completely offline, no internet connection required, in under 500 milliseconds. It is the ultimate frontline compliance gatekeeper, instantly separating clean wood from contaminated trash. But the AI doesn't just flash a yes or no on the screen. It actually mints a DMRV object that stands for Digital Measurement, Reporting, and Verification. This DMRV is the core atom of the entire SaaS product. The phone snaps an image, locks down the exact GPS coordinates, stamps the precise time, attaches the AI's confidence score, and then seals the whole package with a cryptographic hash. It creates an immutable, tamper-evident record of that specific piece of wood at that exact moment in time. So we have this super fast AI on a phone creating these secure records. But here's a provocative question for you. Why isn't one AI model enough to appease a strict carbon credit auditor? The reality is, a single AI model can hallucinate. It can be confidently wrong. If a carbon auditor is going to stake real money and their professional reputation on the purity of a biocarbon feedstock, a solo confidence score from one single AI model on a smartphone simply isn't reliable enough evidence. To really understand why, we have to look at something called the visual fallacy. To a single camera or a single AI model, a piece of weathered gray pine might look perfectly clean, but hidden right inside could be highly toxic CCA, chromated copper arsenate treatment. If a single model makes this mistake and lets a false negative slip into the clean feedstock stream, it ruins the entire batch. That is a $185 per ton mistake. The financial and environmental risk of failure is just way too high to trust one set of digital eyes. When the stakes are that high, you don't rely on one AI. You convene a model council. Ambiguous or high-value loads get escalated to the cloud, where completely different, massive models cross-examine the evidence. We are talking about heavy hitters like Claude Opus 4.8 and the open-rate GPT OSS 120B, which are live today, working alongside roadmap models like Gemini 3.6 Pro. Because they all have completely diverse underlying architectures, they don't share the same blind spots. They independently cross-examine these hard loads to reach a true consensus. So what actually happens when this council reviews that DMRV object? Well, if the different models disagree on the visual evidence, it triggers a deep reject. This escalates the material to physical sensor fusion, like X-ray fluorescence, to get a definitive answer. But when the council agrees, they achieve something incredibly powerful: explainable compliance. The AI doesn't just say, hey, it's clean. The system actually cites specific Ontario Regulation 347 codes and Schedule 4 limits to back up its decision. It converts a probabilistic AI guess into a hard, auditable regulatory verdict. Let's zoom back out to the macro view for a second. If you want to play in the global circular bioeconomy, you have to meet the standards set by top-tier organizations like Puro.Earth. To successfully mint a CO2 removal certificate, or CORC, you have to pass incredibly rigorous standards, like their Biochar 2025 V2 and the Verification and Validation V1.3. A single AI model on a phone will never, ever clear that high audit bar. Rigorous, multi-model council consensus is literally the only way to manufacture the level of trust required by the modern biocarbon market. Now, let's connect all this amazing tech directly to the money, because this is the ultimate economic case. If you just haul a massive walking floor mothership trailer of physical wood, its value is roughly $1,053. But if you use the Sentient Bridge to prove the data provenance and purity of that exact same load, you completely avoid the heavy $60 per ton circle levy, and you unlock a carbon dividend worth $2,674 per load. The value of the data drastically outpaces the legacy physical hauling margins. It's not even close. All of this complex AI consensus and regulatory cross-referencing eventually gets boiled down into the final UI/UX output, the Certificate of Origin, Verification, and Compliance PDF. This single document serves two absolutely massive purposes. First, it's the actual product you hand over to the biocarbon market to prove your material is clean. Second, it acts as an ironclad insurance policy against those staggering $100,000 OREG 347 fines we talked about earlier. It's the ultimate shield and sword for operators in this space. And that brings us to the core takeaway of this entire explainer. The data, not just the wood, is the actual product. The 905 Wood Digital Refinery SaaS application doesn't just process construction waste, it manufactures trust. And in a world filled with strict carbon audits, massive cross-border tariffs, and huge environmental liabilities, trust is the true, scarce commodity that the market is desperately trying to buy. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. As we watch this immense volume of material moving through the Ontario-Michigan waste corridor, the real race isn't about who has the biggest trucks or the cheapest tipping fees. By operationalizing this edge-to-cloud AI architecture via agent.905wood.com, Ontario has already built the trust machine of the future. The real question is, who will ultimately own the ledger of the Canadian circular bioeconomy? It's a fascinating space, and we'll definitely be watching it closely. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer, and I'll catch you next time.